song, I had half the music missing and I couldn't remember how it went, so we got through it anyway. It's a bit echoey. I wonder if you could look up Psalm 34 in your Bibles in front of you. First one to get it, put your hand up. Eileen, would you like to read verses 1 to 10? Do you want to come here and read into the microphone? Thank you, Eileen. I don't want you to have to listen to my voice all morning. I've called this message that we're reading today, The Glory of God in the Face of Jesus. I'll say that again, the glory of God in the face of Jesus. I don't know what it says in those Bibles that you have in front of me, but my Bible titles this psalm, a psalm of David when he pretended madness before Abimelech, who drove him away and he departed. Do yours all say something like that? Because David was running away from King Saul, and he went to the Philistine city of Gath, but he couldn't find anywhere to hide there. And he only narrowly escaped those who were chasing after him. And eventually he hid in a cave at Adullam with many of his men, his followers. And this psalm seems to have been written while they were there and sung in the presence of all these men. Now the verse I want us to focus on, just for a few moments, is verse 5. They looked to him and were radiant, and their faces were never covered with shame. We all know what it means to make the focus of our trust God alone, because we've all been in that place where we've had to come to him for help and trust him completely. But you know, it means more than that. Let's look at it a bit more closely. They looked at him. It was a deliberate act. They didn't just glance. They took a deliberate act of looking at God. And you know, it's very easy during the day to let the concerns of the day stop us focusing on the Lord. Things press in and we get busy and we don't get time. And sometimes we're too worried about what we have to do, or we're worried about our health. And we stop, we fail to stop, to look at the Lord. I know that I have found, and I'm sure many of you will agree, the more we think upon the Lord, the less we think about ourselves, and the better it is. So this verse continues with, they looked to him and were radiant. They reflected the radiance of God's glory because they were looking at him. And radiant here, the word means, or it describes a mother's face when she's lost her children and her face lights up at the sight of them. Do you know what I mean? That feeling of joy, glow of delight. And in Corinthians, Paul explains the same thing. And he says, but we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord. We'll look at that verse a little later on. But back to Psalm 34. And their faces were not ashamed. David knew for sure that God would never forsake anyone who trusts in him. He knew that God was on his side. And just a little further down in verse 7, we read, the angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him. And this obviously reminds us of the account in the Book of Kings, 2 Kings, where it describes how God provided an army of angels leading horses and chariots of fire to protect the prophet Elisha and his servant. And God opened the servant's eyes so that he could see the angelic army surrounding them. The servant suddenly saw things from God's perspective. And in the same way as we focus our eyes on the Lord, we will recognise the adversary's tactics, and we'll also see God's angelic strike force against him. And in the same way as we look to him, we will see people differently. We will see each other differently. We'll see situations differently. We'll see them from God's perspective. I'm giving you a lot of scriptures this morning. There's another one in Hebrews. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning the shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured such opposition from sinful men, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. Fix your eyes on Jesus. He's talking here about a gaze of faith. A gaze of faith. How often do we gaze at the Lord with faith? Our eyes fixed on him. I look at him, and he looks at me, and he shines on me. He shines on you. He shines on each one of us as we look at him. David said in another psalm, one thing I ask of the Lord, this is what I seek, in his temple, to gaze on the beauty of the Lord. Is that what we are seeking? To spend every day in his presence and to gaze upon his beauty. This focus on Jesus means turning away from ourselves and our circumstances and knowing that his gaze purifies our hearts. The light of the countenance of Jesus lights up the eyes of our heart and teaches us to see everything in the light of his truth and his compassion for all men. Just going to pause while you think about those things for a moment. We're going to move on to 2 Corinthians now. 2 Corinthians 4, verse 6. For God, who said, "Let light shine out of darkness," made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of the glory of God. I don't think I've ever really thought about that verse before. When you look at the scriptures in depth, you suddenly see new things revealed to yourself. God, made light to shine out of darkness. What darkness was he talking about? Darkness. Not only is it a natural darkness around us at night time, but the darkness here is a spiritual, moral, intellectual darkness, which has arisen out of error, ignorance, disobedience, willful blindness, and rebellion towards God. This darkness is an evil system that is absolutely opposed to the true light. And the king of that darkness is Satan. Light has shone in our hearts to give the knowledge of the glory of God in the face of Jesus. Knowledge of the glory of God. We all need knowledge. There's a necessity to know things, understand things. And if we don't know, we will keep doing things wrong. Particularly in any aspect of things we don't know anything about. We need instruction on how to do things. I mean, if there was a leak in our plumbing, I would call a plumber. I think Brian would have a bash at it, we might have a few leaks, but we need to know how to do things. Or if we needed a pianist and Hilary and I weren't here, and John said, "I'll come and play." Having never played the piano, I think, it would be awful. You wouldn't know where to start. We need knowledge. We need the knowledge of the glory of God. In fact, without knowledge, ignorance limits our freedom and ability. Think about it. Without knowledge, ignorance limits our freedom and ability. But knowledge gives us the freedom and ability to act. And so this explains this verse. The knowledge of the glory of God enables us because that knowledge creates faith, in us for the works that he has prepared for us to do before time began. The knowledge of the glory of God gives us hope. It enables us to trust him completely and to know that he is who he says he is and that he will provide everything that we need. When we read about knowledge in the Bible, it seems to be always closely tied with relationship with God. We grow in the knowledge of God through our relationship with Jesus. We grow in the knowledge of God so that we become more like his Son. God's greatest desire is for us to seek a relationship with him through Jesus. And that's why he sent his Holy Spirit to help us to do this, to comfort us, to enable us, and empower us to do his will. So God sent the light to shine out of the darkness. What light is he shining? His own glory, shining from the face of Jesus, the exact reflection of the glory of God. God is the source of light and understanding. And we know that Jesus said, I am the light of the world. The light, knowledge, and glory of God are all reflected in the face of Jesus. Only the light of the gospel can penetrate the darkness of unbelief in Jesus. There is no other light. It's either Jesus or darkness. And that's what the world needs to know. The sun is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being. He sustains all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty in heaven. Jesus is the dazzling brightness of God's glorious magnificence, the blazing radiance of his resplendent glory. But we see Jesus. And by the strength of his powerful word, he sustains all of creation, which he spoke into being by the authority of his powerful word. The Word, who was made flesh. We read about that in John 1. I'm going to read a very short resume of Jesus' life. You may want to close your eyes and try and imagine, or just be still in your heart and hear what the Lord is saying. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. That Word, Jesus, was the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. He was willingly disrobed of the glorious magnificence that he shared with the Father from before the dawn of eternity, and became a man. And he was despised and rejected by men. He was a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was ridiculed and scorned and humiliated beyond measure. He was crucified on a cruel cross to take on himself the sins of the whole world, so that whoever comes to him may have everlasting life, everlasting light, everlasting hope, everlasting peace, everlasting joy, and everlasting salvation. And now there is a perfect man, a member of the human race who is seated on the right hand of the Father, who sits on the throne of God in dazzling brightness of God's glorious magnificence and the blazing radiance of God's glory. And in his hands and feet he bears the scars of the nails that pierced innocent flesh, and the scar where the sword pierced his side. Why wouldn't we look at him and be radiant? Our greatest need is to know God. Without him we are lost, wondering what life is all about. We don't know who we are, why we're here, or what we're here for. But God isn't silent. He's been speaking since the foundation of the earth, telling us that he is God. We are his people, and he loves us. He has spoken to us now through Jesus, who is the radiance of God's glory. He brought the glory of God to this earth because he is God, the fullness of God, the exact nature and image of the invisible God. Verse I read from Hebrews reveals the wonder and majesty of Jesus. We need to let the truth of those verses cause us to gaze on him, to enter his presence boldly, and to devote ourselves to him afresh, and become more devoted disciples, as we heard last week. Finally, in 2 Corinthians, we read, "We all with unveiled faces, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as by the Spirit of the Lord." I don't know if any of you remember the old CSSM choruses, and there was one that I used to sing as a child, and I often sing it now as a prayer. Let the beauty of Jesus be seen in me, all his wondrous compassion and purity. O thou Spirit divine, all my nature refine, till the beauty of Jesus be seen in me. We should have sung that maybe. Is this our prayer, or do we forget? Do we wonder if the beauty of Jesus is ever seen in us? Do we feel that the image of Jesus is only faintly seen, if at all? I was thinking that perhaps one of the reasons why the image of Christ is only faintly seen in us is because we try to gaze at him, but we have veiled faces. The veil is a symbol of sin that separates people from God and from each other. Since we all sin, we are all separated from perfection by the guilt and the secrecy of our own veiled sins. We need to recognise that sometimes the veil is there, and we need to quickly turn to the Lord and ask him to remove it, ask him to forgive us. Then, as we gaze upon him, spending time in prayer, meditating on his word, we will become more like him, and we will reflect him to others. The veil is taken away when we turn to him. The light of his countenance the beams of his grace and his mercy dissolve and melt away this veil, just like the sun melts the snow or the frost. And what do we see when the veil is removed? We see the glory of God shining in the person of Jesus. So what does it mean to see the light of the knowledge of the glory of God shining? It means that we will see the perfection of God shining out from Jesus, and that each one of us will receive everything that we need. And this knowledge of the glory of God gives us wisdom. Wisdom, the wisdom of God. Wisdom that is pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit. It's impartial and sincere, and will help us to forgive one another and to encourage one another. We can't know God without knowing Christ. Look at him, gaze at him, so that with unveiled faces we will all reflect the Lord's glory. They looked to him and were radiant. Let's all of us discover the glory of God in the face of Jesus. Then I turned to see the voice that spoke to me, and having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the 7 lampstands, one like the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to his feet, and girded about the chest with a golden band. His hair and head were like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes like a flame of fire. His feet were like fine brass, as if refined in a service, and his voice as the sound of many waters. He had in his right hand 7 stars, and out of his mouth went a sharp, 2-edged sword, and his countenance was like the sun, shining in all its strength. So, may the Lord bless you and watch you, guard and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and enlighten you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace, tranquility of heart and life continuing as you look to him. Amen.